Welcome to TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we're going to check out the purchase order module. This module takes your inventory control to the next level, and it allows you to track your stock orders for product replenishment, as well as any potential customer special orders, and consolidate those into purchase orders to your vendors to help you cut down on the number of orders you're submitting, which can add up in savings on shipping as well as possible bulk product cost savings. We're going to look at the setup and the flow of orders in AIM and talk about some of our terminology, which may be a little new to some folks who maybe have been doing this process for some time. We're also going to talk about some reports that you might find handy. And as always, if there's any questions about anything we're talking about today, go ahead and punch those into the GoToWebinar question bar, and we'll get those answered as best as we can. So let's go ahead and jump over, as always, into my AIM screen. When you're getting started, from the first things that you might find that you're going to want to set up are just a few details in the maintenance area of the module, just kind of similar to other modules. So let's go into maintenance where we have order maintenance. I've got a few things set up here just to kind of get us started. One of the first things you'll want to set up are some shipping codes. Shipping codes are how you're going to track where the product or how the product moves from point A to point B to point C. One of the first things you might want to set up is something basically for tracking how the customer will get their order if you're doing any special orders when that order comes in. And usually something like a customer pickup will usually suffice for something like that. If you are planning on drop shipping these products to your customers, you also have options for tracking that. I'll talk about when you'll be using these shipping codes in just a few minutes, but you can also track how the products are going to get from the vendor to you. So you can have other options in here for things like standard ground, next day air, express delivery, freight, whatever options you want to have. The main thing here is having at least one shipping code that you can use for these details. Give it some kind of unique code. It doesn't have to be anything special. It could be 1, 2, 3. It could be numeric. It could be alphabetical, kind of like I've got here. Just give it a code and a description. All of these other options we'll talk about in future webinars. The main thing is just having those set up here. Now, you might also want to set up one or more what we call problem codes. A problem code is used when we get to the point of receiving a purchase order. And when you put in your purchase order, you're going to say that you're ordering X amount of a certain product. But in the instances where the vendor doesn't ship you exactly what you ordered, you'll use a problem code to keep track of what you expect to happen with that line item on that order. Do you expect to get the rest of that if they undershipped you whenever they have more product available? And in those cases, you may want to have a back order problem code set up. Again, it doesn't need to be anything special. The problem code is just going to be a 1 or 2 letter or number code. You give it a description, and then optionally, you can give it a pending flag. A pending flag is what you want to have happen with that line item on the purchase order at that time. In most cases for back ordered items, if you expect to get those products shipped to you when they're available, you might want to hold that purchase order open. So in other words, if you ordered 6 and they only shipped you 4 and you expect to get the next remaining 2 sometime in the future, you want to receive it on that purchase order. You don't want to have to close the purchase order and say that I'm ordering those remaining 2. So you hold that purchase order open. However, if based on your vendor details, maybe they want you to resubmit that as a new order for those remaining 2. You may want to flag that as a reorder line item. By the way, I've got the vendor discontinued option kind of set up in that same way. Again, these don't have to be your problem codes. These are just some examples that you may find handy. But in the case of, let's say, I can't get it from one particular vendor, I may be able to get it from a secondary vendor, and so I'd want to reorder that line item to a different vendor on a different purchase order. And then in any cases where You don't expect anything more to happen with that line item, such as in the case of the vendor shipped you too many, you ordered 6 and they sent you 8, in my example. You will just want to flag that as canceling that item. Now, cancel doesn't necessarily mean that you're not getting what you received. You'll still receive how many you ever told that you are receiving, 8 in my example, but it will then assume no further activity is happening with that line item on the purchase order. And if there's nothing else going on with it, that would then wind up closing the PO. Again, if that's not making sense just yet, we'll take a look at that a little bit more in just a few minutes when we get to the rest of the flow of the order process, which we'll do right now. We're not going to worry about ordering quantities or order payments at this point. Those are kind of optional things for other scenarios. Let's go back to the main menu and take a look into the modules and POs menu. And you might notice right off the bat, the first thing isn't create purchase orders. If we try to go straight to create purchase orders, it would pop up and say there's nothing to be ordered. And that's because what it's doing is when you go to create a purchase order, instead of just creating it from scratch, what AIM wants to do is it wants to look at what we call open committed orders. You'll notice right above that is the option to enter a committed order. A committed order is something that you as the store are committing to buying from your vendors for your customers. That may be legitimate customers that walk in the front door. It may also be your stock order account. Every instance of AIM has a special customer account called stock. You'll notice when I type in the word stock, I have a pop-up here for an account to stock order, and then the rest of that says Professor Tritech's Emporium, because that's the name of my store in my system here. So you'll always have that. You'll have one per location. I have 2 locations, so I have 2 stock order accounts. That would be if you were going to be typing in an order from scratch. You can come to enter committed orders, type in the word stock, and you'll be keying in a stock order for yourself. If the order is meant to be for someone else, if it's meant to be for a customer, well, then you can type in their name and you would put in that the order is for them. But let's stick with stock for now. And let's also talk about what we mean by a committed order, because you might also notice there's an option for uncommitted order. And basically, kind of like I said, committed orders are, we are committing store dollars to buying product versus we just want to get the order in there, but we're not yet sure if we're going to buy it. So an uncommitted order would be used in those situations. This can be especially helpful if we're talking about when you take a special order for a customer. More often than not, what's happening is maybe a front counter employee is taking that order and they want to get the order into the system, but that employee doesn't necessarily have the authorization to say, yes, we are going to buy this for this customer. So you can start those off as uncommitted orders. And then later on, you can have one of your managers, your purchasing agents, review those. You might see right above where my mouse is, there's an option to change uncommitted orders. That allows you to browse all of your open uncommitted orders and analyze them, say, yep, we're good to go on this, and change them to committed, at which point they would then be available to go into a purchase order. But I am kind of getting ahead of myself. Let's take a look at keying in an order. You can see if we're keying in an order from scratch, it's basically going to have us this little order form, if you will, and you would fill in the SKUs into the SKU field. It would pop up the details. It would bring in by default the primary vendor that you're would normally buy that from, and then you can just key in however many of them you intend to order. Let's say I need to order another 20 of those, and then I'm not changing anything to do with cost or pricing or anything like that. I'm just basically tabbing through, and that goes down as a line item on the order. And I can continue to do that and build out the order for anything that I need to order. Now, another key element of this is you don't necessarily need to have all of these line items be for the same vendor. So that vendor in particular, if I go to the second tab here, this was Acme Wholesalers, but let's go ahead and key in a second line item, and I don't recall all my items, so I'm just hitting F6 to search, and I'm just going to look for another item in here. Let's say we're going to grab some of this premium fingerboard oil, so we'll pull that in. And let's say I don't necessarily want to get that from Acme this time. I'm going to go ahead and get it from Stag. So we'll just kind of do the same thing. Let's say I'm ordering another 10 of those, and this will allow me to add that to the committed order. Now, remember I talked a little bit about the shipping codes before. Up here at the top, in the case of this stock order, I don't necessarily need a shipping code, but if I wanted to have one on there, I would put in customer pickup. Now, customer pickup would particularly be used in this case when we're talking about a legitimate customer who we're placing an order for. And then we could say, yep, you're going to come back and pick this up at the store when it comes in. So that would be the instance of a shipping code here. We're not yet actually generating a purchase order to submit to the vendor just yet. I don't want you to get confused with this PO field up here. This is a consumer or a customer purchase order number. So if you have, let's say, an organization like a school or a business who is placing an order with you, and they have a purchase order of their own that they want to give to you for the purposes of tracking their own spending, that's where that would go. So I don't want you to get confused. This is the customer purchase order number. We have yet to get to our own purchase order, but let's go ahead and kind of flesh this out. We'll finalize this by hitting save. And you might recall how when I had gone to click the create purchase order button before, it said there was nothing to be ordered. I'm just going to go ahead and hit cancel print on this. This would be something that you could print as a receipt to the customer. By the way, there is a deposit function in there where if you were keying in a special order for a customer, you could click that and take a deposit up to 100% of the value of the products ordered for the purposes of kind of having them prepay for their order. But now what you'll notice is if I go to the Create Purchase Orders button, this will open up a Create Purchase Orders window, and this will go vendor by vendor. Remember how I had 2 line items on that committed order for my stock account? Well, they were each for a separate vendor. So in this case, it's pulling up the first vendor, Acme Wholesalers, and it's showing me the 20 items that I am placing on order for that. Now, one of the things you can do at this time is you can analyze the cost of whatever you have on this order and compare that to any minimum or free shipping amounts that you may be able to take advantage of on the given vendor. I don't have any set up for this vendor, but really quick, if I just use the drop downs up here to go to modules and accounts payable and add change vendor, I just want to point this out. Let's take a look at Acme here. I'm going to select them. And one of the things you can do is on the details tab, in addition to putting in any like account information, which will print on the purchase order to the vendor, you can also put in any minimum or potentially free shipping amounts. And that way, when you put those in here, those will show up when you're creating the purchase order. So this is a way for your purchasing agent, whoever you have in charge of ordering your product, to compare what is waiting in the wings to be ordered, regardless of who it's being ordered for. It's most important about who it's being ordered from. So in this case now, this is all coming from Acme. Right now we're sitting at $40 in cost. If I said that I was a minimum order of $100, I would either wait on ordering this, I could skip this vendor and move to the next one, or I could potentially right click and edit orders, or basically kind of go in and put in other items for potentially ordering in this. So there are functions for kind of tacking on to the PO depending on what you need to have happen. So let's go ahead, and before I hit save on this, actually, I do want to point out one other function here. On this second tab, the printing options tab, this is the details of billing and shipping that will print on your purchase order. By default, it's going to have whatever information you have for your workstation store name and address and phone number and stuff like that. There's also an option up here for what's called a print type. You may want to set this up. I'll show you where you can set those up. You can choose to either print the cost or the retail on the purchase order. You can also say to print neither, and if you don't make a selection here, it's the same as printing neither. I'm going to go ahead and say print the cost on that. And then when I go ahead and save this, and let's just go ahead and print this to the screen, and I'll probably have to drag it from my monitor over. There we go. You can see that this is printing out a bona fide PO, a purchase order to submit to Acme Wholesalers. My rep over there is apparently Robert Smith. He's got the cure for what ails you. If I had my account info in with Acme, like I pointed out a few seconds ago, that would show up here. There's the bill and ship to info, the line items, and so on and so forth. And if I put any terms or notes on there, those would be printing there as well. Back in the create purchase order screen, it skips to the next vendor automatically. So now there's the second line item from that committed order that I keyed in, and then that would go out to Stag as well. So then we'll hit save on that, and that's basically the same concept there. So we go from a committed order to one or more purchase orders. It's important to remember you don't necessarily need to have that be a one-to-one relationship. The whole idea of this is perhaps over the course of a week or so maybe, or however often you go in between submitting purchase orders to your vendors, you may have customers come in and call or just say, hey, can I order this from you? So you may be building up multiple committed orders over time, maybe even for your stock account. Maybe you have individual departments and department heads who are responsible for going in and keying in their own stock orders. So when that's all said and done and you get to the next time that you're going to be creating a purchase order, it'll look at all of those open committed orders. And if all of those open committed orders, let's say hypothetically there's 10 open committed orders, if they're all have product that's being ordered from the same vendor, that would wind up generating one purchase order. Instead of throughout the course of that week submitting 10 different purchase orders to that vendor and potentially having to wait on all those different orders being sent back to you from the vendor, you can instead just consolidate them all. Potentially, again, maybe you get to that point where the vendor says, hey, if you spend enough, I'll throw in free shipping because you've built up a big enough order for that. So again, that's something that you can take advantage of if that's available to you. The flip side is also true. You might have just one giant committed order, kind of like what I was doing where I keyed in my 2 line items, each from a different vendor. Let's say you had a massive entered a committed order in there with 20 different line items, and each one, for whatever reason, was being ordered from a different vendor. Well, in that instance, you'd have one committed order, but 20 purchase orders. Because again, the committed order is dependent primarily on who you're ordering it for, and the purchase orders are who you're ordering it from. So that's an easy way to kind of remember that. Now, you don't necessarily need to do all this from scratch. You don't have to key in all your orders manually. If you are putting in any kind of min-max quantities, or if you're having AIM generate those min-max quantities for you, then you can use this stock order by vendor program to analyze when you're running low on product and have it generate those committed orders on your behalf when you're falling low in stock. Basically, what this would do is this would go through by default. It would analyze all of your inventory, and anything where your quantity that you have available to sell is less than the minimum quantity that you have for that SKU, this would want to generate that onto a committed order for that vendor to get you back up to your maximum quantity. I don't know if I have anything in here really. There's that premium fingerboard oil as it happens. So in this case, that line item, that RT71, I have no quantity available. This is for my second location. We can kind of see that here. So I don't have any available, and it wants me to order 25 of those. Now, the reason for that is if I right click and just look at the details of this item, we can see that this has a quantity available of 0. The minimum is 10, and the maximum is 25. So basically, because this number is less than this number, it's showing up on that create stock orders by vendor program, and it's saying to order 25 of them because that's what my maximum is set at. If this was sitting at an available quantity of 1, then it would want me to order 24 of them to get me back up to that maximum. So if you've got all those set, then this utility here, stock orders by vendor, will just, whenever you run it, it'll analyze those quantities and this will generate committed orders for you without you having to key them all in manually. Then you might do this at the end of each day, let's say, as you're kind of prepping for closing the store. Just click on this, and this can build a committed order for you for whatever other items are waiting to be processed. You can see this does go vendor by vendor. Ultimately, when that's all done, and then again, maybe at the end of the week, you come in and create purchase orders. So this will, in essence, this whole process, committed orders, purchase orders, ultimately what this can do is this can replace kind of the let's call it the default method of receiving inventory in AIM. Because with the base package, you still have the ability to keep track of how many products you're running low on with a if we look at the inventory reports menu, there's an inventory reorder report, which looks at the same numbers as the stock orders by vendor program and prints out how much you need to reorder for any given vendor. This program, though, with the benefit of the PO module, is it creates those orders for you. Without the PO module, you would just be calling up or logging onto your vendor's website and keying those in manually. And then when those orders do come in, when those orders do come in, you would be going to modules and inventory, add change, and you would be receiving those line items one by one. And of course, at that point, you don't necessarily have in front of you how many you ordered. You're just kind of taking it for granted that what you received is what you ordered, at least as far as the program is concerned. But with the receive purchase order program now, this will show you everything that's outstanding. Here's the 2 purchase orders I just keyed in. Let's say that now some time has passed and Acme has sent me my product. I can go ahead and double click on that purchase order to take me to the second tab, the items on purchase order tab. And at this point, I'm probably unboxing the products out of their shipping containers and scanning those products. So let's pretend I scan that product, beep. And you can see when I do that, it finds that line item on the purchase order and it increases the received quantity by 1. So basically for each one I pull out and I scan with a barcode scanner, it increases that received quantity by 1. So this is, again, a way to have some quality control, make sure that you got everything that you ordered by physically pulling it out of the box and scanning it, and that will then verify that you received that item. Now, there are, of course, certain circumstances where you don't necessarily want to have to do that. This is a small enough order where I can say, yep, I can just pull all 20 out, count them up. I don't necessarily want to have to scan every one. What I could do is I could right click on that and I could say to tag the current line item with the quantity specified. And if that's the case, I could just basically do that. And you can see it matches that up now and says I have 20 in stock that I'm receiving. Let me just clear that out, because another thing you can do is if it was like this, where there's just the one line item and you know that you got everything, you can just right click and say tag all as being received. And this is especially helpful if you've got maybe 2 or 3 line items. And again, you can very easily verify, yep, we got everything. So you click on that. And if there were more than the one line item there, it would flag all of those where the receiving quantity matches the order quantity. Now, as far as that scanning it and it increasing that quantity by 1, there is a receiving option there that controls that. I'm going to show you where these and other settings are coming from. You can see there's a receive quantity type here, and it says default to 1 when receiving. If instead you would like it to pop up and ask for the quantity received, you can switch that. You can say ask for quantity when receiving. So then that way when you scan it, it will instead just ask for that. So again, let's just clear that out. And again, I'm going to quote unquote scan it. And you can see now it's going to ask for the quantity received. So I can say 20, and there we go. So basically it puts those in there. So those are some functions for this process. Now, if let's say you didn't get all 20, let's say you got 18 or you got 22 or something like that. But for whatever reason, the received quantity doesn't match the order quantity. That's where problem codes would come into play. You can right click and say, we're going to add a problem code for any quantity discrepancies. And this is where you can pull those problem codes in. You could say, yep, we got 18 out of 20. We're going to flag that as back ordered because we're expecting the vendor to ship the remaining quantity, et cetera, et cetera. You can change the pending flag on a case-by-case basis. And this is a little area here where you can key in any notes that you want to have there for the purposes of tracking this problem code. By the way, if you do have multiple line items on here that each need their own quantity discrepancy, this process where you right click and add it for all discrepancies will do it for all of them. You can also technically highlight the item, go to the number 3 tab and flag it as a problem exists and choose the appropriate code, put in the pending flag, et cetera, et cetera. Let me, John, I see your question coming in. Let me just go ahead and talk a little bit about where some of these default settings are coming from. And that will kind of wrap up our session, except for a few reports. And then I will make sure I get to your question there. But thank you so much for asking it. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, the whole flow, you start with committed orders, which then can be used to generate purchase orders, which you can then receive. And then just to kind of wrap that up, in the PO reports area, you've got reports here for analyzing what purchase orders you have open and things like that. You've got options for running inventory that is waiting in orders by category and by vendor. If you do a lot of customer special orders, this report can be super handy because this will basically show you which items you've received but have not yet been invoiced at point of sale for your customers. So they have yet to actually come in and pick those orders up. So I encourage you to check out all of these reports. You may find that there are a number of them that really help out and are super beneficial for you. And as always, with any of these reports, you can customize these menus, especially these touchscreen menus, to put a lot of those buttons right here on the main screen. And then once again, before I forget, those default settings I was talking about can be found in your maintenance and general maintenance and your workstation settings. So here in your workstation settings, there is a PO tab. This is where it will pull in those default billing and shipping addresses. This is where it will choose the cost or the retail to print on those. And if we take a look over to here, this is where it will pull in which type of receiving method you prefer when you are receiving those. So hopefully that all makes sense. If there are any questions, definitely let me know. Before I switch away to just my face cam here, let me go ahead and make sure I answer John's question. So his question states, I tried to enter a committed order for an item that I don't have in inventory already. AIM won't save the entry. Instead, it pops up a warning on the SKU field asking for a selection from inventory or to enter in the inventory before creating the order. This happens whether I manually enter a SKU or leave it blank. And John, that is a fabulous point, because in that step where you're going into the POs and entering a committed order, that item does need to exist in inventory. So just like we saw here, if I put in the RT14, and of course it's letting me know that I already have that on an open order, you can see it pulls in all those details. Let's just put that in again. But if I try to put something that doesn't exist, let's say RT10, you can see that it doesn't pull in categories or descriptions or anything like that. Now I could certainly fill all this in. Let's say it is an instrument, and it's this, just to kind of get this into it really quick here. I'm going to order it from Stag. I want one of those, and the cost is $4. I'm going to sell it for 10. But you can see it's not letting me do that. It's popping up this little exclamation point here saying that SKU is not found. Now, John, what you and what others can do, if this is something that you do intend to have in your system, but you just don't have it yet, what you can do is you can uncheck this committed order checkbox. By unchecking that, when you get through and kind of flesh that out, and I just kind of jumped ahead and went straight to the last bit there, you can see now it will ask for some extra info. Now, again, none of this info necessarily is finalized or set in stone. When you go to edit your order, you can change any of these details, but this will allow you to put that line item in even if it doesn't exist in inventory yet. this is another reason why uncommitted orders might be especially helpful for your front counter staff, because maybe the customer is asking you to order something for them that you have not yet had a chance to actually key into your system yet. Or maybe it's something you don't normally stock anyways, but you do want to go ahead and order it for them as a special request for them. So this gives you the ability to do that. By unchecking committed order, lets you key that line item in. Now, of course, when I save this, this will not show up in create purchase orders because it's not yet an actual committed order. It says there's nothing to be ordered. I would then have to go over to change uncommitted orders. There's the order that I just keyed in. And from here, there's that that I just keyed in. What I could do at this point is I could go to the second tab here, correct any details here as far as cost or vendor or category or anything like that, and then click here to create. That will take all those details, plug them into the add inventory program for me, and then when that looks all good and I save all that, that will now exist as an item. So back on here on the order tab, I should have pointed this out, that line item originally had a status of a little asterisk indicating it was not an inventory, but now it says uncommitted, and then I can go ahead and commit it. If I didn't create it first and I tried to click commit, it would say there's one or more items that do not yet exist as inventory that I would need to adjust first. So hopefully that helps out, John, and hopefully this helps out everyone who's attending here today. Once again, I want to make sure that the content that I am delivering here for you is helpful and especially relevant for you. So if there are any webinar suggestions that you would find super helpful, definitely let me know. You can send that as an email to training@tritechretail.com. We will be back not next week, not even the week after that, since it's always the second Tuesday in every month, and we kind of got a little funky window here. I want to stick to that schedule. So the next webinar will be April 13th. And if I remember correctly, that's going to be all about setting up and securing your employees and other users of your program. So definitely check that out. If you want to make sure that your employees are set up properly, feel free to check that out. We've got other webinars coming up after that. So go to our TriTech University page and get yourself registered for those. And if nothing else, we will see you next month. I hope you all got something beneficial from this. If there's anything we can do in the meantime, definitely give us a call at our support lines. We're here to make sure that this is all going smooth for you. So hope you have a great month, and we'll see you next time. Take care.